Good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's presentation. I'm excited to guide you through our discussion on hazardous wastes, a critical topic in environmental management. Today, we'll explore the classification of hazardous wastes, their origin, and how they are reduced at the source. We'll look into collection and handling techniques, as well as management issues and planning methods. We'll also review relevant environmental acts that govern waste management and dive into case studies of major industries. This includes coal-fired power stations, the textile industry, oil refineries, distilleries, sugar industries, and units generating radioactive waste. So, let's get started and understand how we can better manage hazardous wastes for a safer environment. Hazardous wastes are defined as those wastes that originate from industrial, institutional, or even consumer sources, and they pose a potential danger either immediately or over time to both human health and the environment. These dangers come from their physical, chemical, biological, or radioactive properties, such as ignitability, corrosiveness, reactivity, and toxicity. You'll often find examples like empty containers that previously held solvents, paints, or pesticides. These containers can easily become part of the urban waste stream, especially when they are mixed with municipal waste. Some hazardous wastes are particularly dangerous because they can cause explosions in incinerators or fires at landfill sites. Others, like pathological waste from hospitals or radioactive materials, require very special handling procedures to prevent any harm. This highlights the importance of effective management practices. Proper handling means that hazardous wastes should be stored, collected, transported, and disposed of separately from other waste streams. Whenever possible, they should undergo treatment to make them harmless before final disposal. Understanding these key points helps us see why careful management is essential for protecting public health and our environment from the risks associated with hazardous wastes. Let's talk about radioactive substances. These are materials that emit ionizing radiation, which means they release energy in the form of radiation. This radiation can be really dangerous because prolonged exposure can cause damage to living organisms, including humans. That's why handling these substances requires extreme caution. What's particularly concerning about radioactive substances is that they tend to persist for a long time. They don't just disappear quickly, which means the potential hazard remains over an extended period. This persistence makes them a significant focus when we're discussing hazardous waste and how to manage it safely. Understanding these properties helps us appreciate the importance of proper disposal and safety protocols when dealing with radioactive materials, especially since they can pose long-term risks to health and the environment. Let's talk about chemicals and their role in hazardous waste. Most of the hazardous chemical wastes we encounter can be grouped into four main categories. These are synthetic organics, inorganic metals, salts, acids and bases, and flammables and explosives. Each of these groups contains chemicals that pose different kinds of risks. Some chemicals are especially dangerous because they are highly toxic to most forms of life. When these hazardous compounds are present in waste streams at levels at or above their threshold levels, the entire waste stream is classified as hazardous. This highlights the importance of understanding the chemical makeup of waste. Recognizing these key groups and their toxicity helps us manage and handle waste more safely, connecting directly to our overall goal of effective hazardous waste management. Now, let's talk about biomedical wastes. The main sources of hazardous biological wastes are hospitals and biological research facilities. These places generate a variety of waste products that need careful management. Most of this waste includes things like malignant tissues that are discarded during surgical procedures. These are tissues that may contain cancer cells or other dangerous biological material. In addition, contaminated materials such as hypodermic needles, which are used for injections, and bandages that have been exposed to infectious agents, also fall under this category. Outdated drugs are another important source, as they can contain active biological compounds and pose risks if not disposed of properly. Understanding these sources is crucial because it helps us grasp the importance of proper waste management in healthcare and research environments. It's all about preventing the spread of infections and protecting both health workers and the environment. Now, let's talk about flammable wastes. Most of these wastes are also classified as hazardous chemical wastes. This dual classification is really important because it highlights the high potential hazards involved in storing, collecting, and disposing of these materials. When we think about flammable wastes, they can come in different forms: liquid, gaseous, or solid. However, most often they are liquids. Common examples include organic solvents, oils, plasticizers, and even organic sludge. Recognizing these as both flammable and hazardous helps us understand the risks and ensures we handle them with the proper precautions to keep everyone safe. Now, let's talk about explosives. Explosive hazardous wastes primarily consist of ordnance materials, such as artillery wastes, which come from manufacturing processes or industrial gases related to ordnance production. These wastes are particularly important to consider because, similar to flammables, they pose a high risk during storage, collection, and disposal. That means we can't treat them the same as regular chemicals. They need special attention due to their potential hazards. It's also worth noting that these wastes can exist in various forms: solid, liquid, or gaseous, depending on the specific type and source. Recognizing these different forms helps us understand the risks involved and how to handle them safely. Overall, understanding the nature and risks of explosive wastes is crucial for proper management and safety in any operation dealing with hazardous materials. When we talk about hazardous waste, it's important to understand that it often includes byproducts from a variety of activities. These include industrial processes, domestic routines, commercial operations, and even healthcare activities. Basically, any activity that produces waste can generate hazardous materials. As technology advances and industries develop new products and practices, the amount of hazardous waste we produce can actually increase. This means that growth in industrial activity often correlates with more hazardous waste being generated, which can pose additional environmental and health risks. Most hazardous waste comes from the manufacturing sector, especially when producing goods that we consume or that are used in further industrial processes. Think about factories that produce electronics, chemicals, or plastics. These are major sources of hazardous waste. Understanding where hazardous waste originates helps us better manage and control its impact. Since most of it is linked to manufacturing, focusing on safer production methods and waste management practices in these industries is crucial for reducing the overall hazardous waste footprint. This connection ties back to our broader discussion on sustainable industrial practices and environmental responsibility. Now let's take a closer look at agricultural land and agro-industry. These areas can actually be significant sources of hazardous wastes that affect our health and environment. For example, pesticides, fertilizers, and veterinary products, which are commonly used on farms, can pose risks if they are not managed properly. Farms themselves generate a lot of these wastes, and it's important to recognize that agrochemicals can leach into the soil and water sources while they are stored, especially if storage practices are not optimal. Additionally, after these chemicals are applied to crops or livestock, they can cause environmental damage if they are not used carefully. This highlights how critical it is to handle these substances responsibly, because improper management can lead to exposure for people and harm ecosystems. Overall, understanding the risks from agricultural waste helps us appreciate the need for better practices in farming and agro-industry to protect both health and the environment. In our homes, we often keep a variety of hazardous substances like batteries, dry cells, furniture polishes, and wood preservatives. We also have stain removers, paint thinners, rat poisons, herbicides, pesticides, mosquito repellents, and many types of paints and disinfectants. Plus, fuels such as kerosene and other automotive products. While these items are useful, they can pose significant risks during storage, use, and disposal if not handled properly. It's important to be aware of the potential dangers to prevent accidents or environmental harm. Moving beyond the household, we also have to consider mines and mineral processing sites. These places handle hazardous products found in the additives, the final products, and the waste generated during processing. The handling of such materials requires strict safety measures because the risks are not only to the workers, but also to the environment. Recognizing these hazards at different stages helps us understand the broader importance of managing hazardous substances carefully, whether at home or in industrial settings. This ties into the overall theme of our presentation, emphasizing safe practices and responsible management across all sectors. Let's take a closer look at healthcare facilities and the types of waste they generate. These are key sources of pathological waste, which includes things like human blood and contaminated needles. You'll find these wastes coming from a variety of places, such as dentists' offices, veterinary clinics, home healthcare services, blood banks, hospitals, clinics, and medical laboratories. It's important to recognize that these facilities handle materials that can pose serious health risks if not managed properly. Moving on to commercial wastes, these originate from everyday businesses like gasoline stations, dry cleaners, and auto repair shops. The hazardous waste they produce can vary quite a bit depending on the specific services they offer. For instance, a dry cleaner might generate chemical wastes, while an auto repair shop could produce solvents or oils. Connecting this to our overall theme, understanding the different sources of waste helps us appreciate the importance of proper waste management practices. Whether it's a healthcare setting or a commercial operation, identifying and controlling these waste streams is crucial for protecting public health and the environment. Now, let's take a closer look at institutional hazardous waste sources. Primarily, these come from research laboratories, research centers, and military installations. These places often handle or produce materials that are hazardous, and managing this waste properly is crucial for safety and environmental protection. Additionally, military establishments don't just generate typical hazardous waste. They also carry out activities that produce other types of hazardous wastes. These can include household, commercial, and industrial wastes, which adds another layer of complexity to waste management in these settings. Understanding these sources is essential because they represent a significant portion of the overall hazardous waste landscape. By identifying and controlling waste from these institutions, we can better protect health and the environment, which ties back to our overall goal of effective waste management. Let's take a closer look at some key sources of industrial hazardous waste. Many industrial activities generate hazardous wastes, and understanding where they come from is crucial for effective management. For instance, in the petroleum fuel industry, hazardous wastes include not only the refinery products like fuels and tar, but also impurities such as phenol and cyanides that can end up in the waste stream. Additionally, sludge from storage tanks is another significant waste generated during refining processes. Recognizing these sources helps us pinpoint where potential hazards originate. Moving on, solid waste disposal sites are primarily designed for municipal solid waste, but they often also contain hazardous wastes when these haven't been properly separated. This highlights the importance of correct waste segregation at the source to prevent contamination of general disposal sites and to reduce environmental risks. Finally, contaminated sites are areas that have been polluted due to activities involving hazardous substances, whether through ongoing use, production, or accidental spills. These sites often include former industrial locations that used or produced hazardous materials. Identifying and managing these contaminated sites is essential to prevent further environmental and health impacts. Understanding these sources ties into the larger picture of managing hazardous waste effectively and protecting our environment and communities from potential dangers. When it comes to building materials, it's important to be aware that some of them, like roofs and pipes, may contain hazardous substances. For example, materials that incorporate asbestos or copper can pose risks, especially when they deteriorate or are disturbed during renovations or demolitions. These materials can become sources of hazardous waste, which requires careful handling and proper disposal. Recognizing these potential risks is a key part of managing environmental safety in building management. By understanding the materials involved, we can better prevent environmental contamination and protect public health. So, always consider the composition of building materials and ensure safe practices are in place for their removal and disposal.